please put that in your video?
No paparazzi. Please, no.
So we've got our 3 boxes here, and I want these boxes, I'm not going to put a lid on them because of the way that the ribbon is going to go around them, so I want to have a little rabbit that will run around the inside of here and then the outside of this part, so that the box top and bottom will nest together. Now, I've got a router set up with a bit to do the inside here, but the distance between the edge of this roller bearing and the edge of the bit is not exactly halfway. I couldn't find a bit in my shop that has a rabbit setting that is exactly halfway. It's close, but not quite. So I'm going to do the tops with this guy, and then the bottoms I'll set with the router table. This one, because it's so shallow, is going to cause some issues. This bearing actually hits the top before I can cut anything off, so I'm going to have to get creative with that 3rd box. Here at the router table, I've got all the corners squared out with a chisel, and the goal is to cut the inverse of this rabbit that runs all the way around on the outside edge of this box. So I'll just run this along here using the fence, take a little bit off and set the height properly, but I need to play with the width just a little bit. So I'm going to take a few test cuts and see how this thing fits together. Oh yeah. Been scratching my head about this top here. I could not find a bit that would fit. Didn't really want to go out and buy one, so I found this shaped bit right here, and I'm going to be able to have the proper amount of overlap, and we're only going to be able to take a tiny little bit. So I'm probably going to have about 1/8, maybe a tiny bit less of a rabbit in here, but honestly, that's good enough for me. I don't need this to be super deep. I just need the box to sit on top of itself. So sometimes the most obvious solution isn't staring you in the face, but I think this little bit is going to do it for us. Parts pretty much cut, so I got to do a little bit of sanding on the parts of the bows, and also this part of the ribbon still has some table saw mark on it. It's not the prettiest thing in the world, so I think I'm going to run these through the wide belt sander before I start sticking them onto the side of each box. I've got a good number of parts cut here, so what I've been doing is I've got the cross piece going all the way across. I'm actually going to have to glue this down in order to figure out how long these cross pieces are going to need to be. But for all 3 boxes, I have both the base and top pieces cut, so that this ribbon will look like it goes all the way up while separating nicely. Now, before I move ahead, I'm going to have to glue some of these pieces down, and instead of just using a typical wood glue that would take a couple of hours to dry and might be a little bit messy, I'm actually going to use some just typical super glue. Often it is called CA glue in woodworking because it is for cyanoacrylate, but that takes way too long to say. So we're just going to be using a little bit of this stuff to put some of these together. Another thing that I wanted to point out is these little itty bitty tiny pieces, and even just this thin material, tends to blow out or chip off when cutting through it with a regular saw blade. And one of the ways that you can prevent that is by using something like this. This is called a zero tolerance fence, or often called a scab fence because it's just stuck on. But the zero tolerance part is just so that the only extra room that it needs is just enough room for those teeth to pass through this, so that the rest of the piece, that thin piece, is supported all the way up to where it is getting cut. This has been super, super important to keep these pieces from being all chipped out and nasty. Got most of the pieces glued on by now. Unfortunately, the super glue that I've got at the shop does not set quite as quickly as I'd like. It takes about 15-20 minutes to really tack in place, so I don't have to clamp it or keep it in clamps. But I'm about ready to start messing with the actual parts of the bow. So it looks like we've got our ribbon wrapping up around the box on both of these boxes here. This one's a little bit further behind, but the important thing is that the tops are ready to receive each of these. So the way that this is going to work is I'm going to take these, I'm going to add a little bit of ornamentation at the ends here, and I'm also going to cut in an angle here, probably a 45, to make each of these stand up here. Got my ends cut and sanded for our ribbons. These tops are really starting to come together, but I've got to cut in here. Now that these pieces are so small, cutting them on something like a chop saw or a table saw is just ridiculously dangerous. So we're just going to use a sander. Pretty close to getting these things done. What's left is sanding the parts of the bow. So these guys and also these right here. I'm realizing that a lot of these are a lot thicker than what these ended up coming down to. These actually got sent through our wide belt sander. So we're having significant thickness issues. So I'm having to take these back to the spindle sander and just sanding them down to thickness. Alright guys, so it's like 4:30 on Thursday. I haven't even started making the actual video yet, so I think I've bit off a little more than I can chew. This box right here is pretty darn close to done. I've just glued these on. They're still a little bit loose, so I'm just not going to touch it for a minute. These guys are going to get glued on next, and then we're going to apply the finish. Unfortunately, these two are going to have to show up in a later video. I just don't have the time to get these done today. Really wanted to get these done, but it's a lot of little minute bits of sanding. I mean, these tiny little things. My fingers are hurting right now. So these two are going to wait for another video. This guy is going to be the completed product that you'll see. Now remember, when you're finishing, it's cold outside, so be sure to wear your shop-approved slippers. This has always been my favorite part. This thing looks awesome with oil on it. Sadly, in the middle of it, I got a little bit too rough trying to get inside these little parts of the bow, and the super glue did not hold on this guy right here. So unfortunately, this is gonna have to wait for a while until this oil soaks in, probably at least 4 or 5 days before I can try to re-super glue this back on. But this project is just about finished. So I definitely was a little bit ambitious with the 3 boxes, but I think that this thing turned out great.